Yes, we're finally back. Thanks to our singer right there, John Sebastian. One-hit wonder, but boy, what a great TV theme song that was. Welcome back, the theme to Welcome Back, Cotter, and welcome back to the Ziggy and Zarley podcast, episode 4, or Quattro for our Spanish listeners. Paul Roper here with Jim Merritt. Jimmy, how you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. Very glad to be back. Feels like it was too long, you know. Like I just have so much hockey things to say that I couldn't get off of my chest for these past 2.5 weeks. So very good to be back, and very good to be on the podcast with you as always. So how things going for you, Mr. Roper?
Well, things are quite good. The Otter season has come to an end in exciting fashion, no less, as they were able to get the big overtime victory on Saturday. Now it's onward to the OHL priority selection. Potential big news coming out of there, Sean Day, allegedly getting exceptional status, according to Bob McKenzie, and usually Bob tells no lies, so if Bob says so, then it is true. It looks like Sean Day is going to get early entry to the OHL. The question is who's going to pick him. Ottawa might not pick him, and the Otters might not pick him. He might slip, and that could potentially mean he might not be part of the OHL a year early, even though he got the status. So it'll be an interesting story there. But big day in the NHL today with the GM meetings. We'll start right off the bat with that as they're discussing potential rule changes among those trying to change the size of the goaltending equipment, potential coaches' challenges, among other things. And Jim, we'll start with you. What do you think are some of the big things that come out of those GM meetings?
Well, probably the most disappointing thing that I've seen so far is the lack of traction on a coach's challenge. Doesn't seem like it's getting a ton of support in the GM meeting, which really is a shame because in this day and age with human error being avoidable by having, I know the argument, you don't want to slow down the game, you don't want any more stoppages, but it's not like we're giving them unlimited coaches challenges. Have, say, one a game, have it be on only certain things that you can challenge, like goaltender interference, like a high stick on the puck for a goal, you know, like things that you would think would be reviewed anyway. But that way, just in case you see a referee blow a call, and hey, it's not, you know, it's unfortunate when it happens, but at the same time, everybody makes mistakes. It'd just be nice to have some kind of way to not have that potentially cripple a game for a team. And the other interesting thing that I find in the GM meetings is that the NHL really pushing for grandfathering in of visors. It doesn't wear one now, can continue not to wear one, but everybody, as they come up from junior or college, where they're already wearing visors or full cages, would have to keep a visor for player safety. The interesting part is, being that the NHLPA has pretty much voted it down once again. The NHL wants to work with the NHLPA to issue a joint statement on this, but they are willing to unilaterally make the move and have the players' union file a grievance against them for it.
Yeah, you know, I wish that we could have seen the mandatory wearing of visors for the players just for the sheer fun of the pool that I would call the Craig McTavish pool. Who would be the last player to not wear a visor in the NHL? I think it's imperative that they have to do so for safety, especially when you consider 73% of players in the NHL now wear visors, which is a much bigger amount than what we've seen over the past few years. But in the CHL, everyone wears visors. They wear cages in the college ranks. And I'm not surprised that it was voted down. The NHLPA, I think, still wants a little bit of freedom in that aspect, considering there's players that wear it for comfort reasons, not so much for safety reasons, and they know the risks that they take if they don't wear a visor. Unfortunately, you see a case with Mark Stahl, who is out with the after blocking the shot near his eye, and unfortunately, those injuries are going to happen. But with the NHLPA voted down, it looks like that players will choose whatever they want, and I'm okay with it because I think it's a risk that they have to take. The one that I would hope that they continue with is goaltender equipment. I think it's too damn big, as the rent is too damn high, guys would say. Jimmy McMillan, the goalie equipment is too damn big, because it is. I mean, they got pillows right now for goalie pads, and hopefully they'll be able to try and make that a little bit smaller, because some of these goalies look ridiculous compared to even 10, 15 years ago. You look at highlights from 1996, and they were complaining back then that the pads were too big compared to 1980. Well, look at 1996 and now. There's a huge difference in the last 15 or 16 years. So hopefully they'll try and go forward with trying to reduce the goaltender pads. It's always been an issue over the last 10 years, but hopefully they'll back their statements this time, because I think the goaltenders have a much bigger advantage now than they used to by wearing pads that I think are doing a little bit more than just protecting them. I think it's almost making it an unfair advantage for some goaltenders to try and draw as close to the line as possible by trying to get the maximum size equipment. Hopefully they'll switch things up to make it a little bit easier on the shooters.
Yeah, I mean, some of these guys are looking like the Michelin men out there. I mean, it's getting to the point where, you know, when you're going to start seeing sumo wrestlers put into the net just because they take up so much of the space. I mean, it's getting to the point where there's no holes to shoot at anymore. So, I mean, the days of 8-7 games are long behind us now, because now there's just every time you take a shot, you're more likely to hit equipment than you are to hit the net. So, unfortunately, yeah, I do agree. I would like to see the reduction in the goalie pad size. Jumping back on the visor issue, though, maybe somebody that I would have voted for in the Craig McTavish pool for last guy to not wear a visor would have been Pittsburgh's own Brooks Orpik, who actually started wearing a visor in practice after seeing the Mark Stahl incident, and just started wearing one in the game, and it actually was very beneficial for him, because I think about maybe 2 or 3 games ago, he took a shot up high, it bounced right off the visor, and you could actually see the kind of stunned look on his face when he grabbed the visor and was like, oh, thank God I started doing that. So good on Brooks Orpik for keeping himself safe. And yeah, let's trim down the Michelin men out there. Let's go back to the 1980s, where they were wearing, you know, like basically a 12-pack of pop size pads, and, you know, games were 10-2.
Rollins' first baseman's glove that Keith Hernandez used to wear. I mean, that equipment pales in comparison to what they have nowadays. Nowadays, I mean, as you said, Michelin men, it's like they're wearing tires, and hopefully they'll be able to make some movement on that. You touched on earlier the coach's challenge. I like the fact that they're not really going forward with this. I still think that you need a human element, even though that referees aren't perfect. But the NHL went to great lengths to make sure that the length of games wasn't too long by having the hurry-up face-off rule. It's worked to perfection. Average NHL games went from about, I think, 2:30 to almost 2:15. So they cut about 15 to 20 minutes thanks to the hurry-up face-off rule. If you add the coach's challenge, I think it's going to add a little bit more to that. And what exactly could you challenge? I mean, there wouldn't be much out there. Maybe if there was the coach's challenge, you would have that goal that Matt Duchene scored offside about a month ago not count. I mean, it would probably hurt for plays like that, but then again, if baseball could finally go to instant replay on home runs and other plays of that sort, maybe the NHL can make some movement with some instant replay. But I think that they can't rely too much on the video to make sure if the correct call is made. Bad calls are always a part of sports, no matter what. And even video is not going to make that perfect. So I'm not totally surprised that they were still shooting that down. A couple of years ago when it went to a vote, it was 28-2 that GMs voted against the coach's challenge. I'm sure there might be a little bit more movement now, but I would still not expect to see coaches review for for bad plays on instant replay. Excuse me, for questionable calls on instant replay. I still think that the replay should only be used for goals.
Well, the only thing is, as a grumpy Penguins fan after last year's playoff series, I believe it was probably I think it was actually game 1 of the series. Penguins were very much in the game, and then Danny Briere's about 10 feet off sides when he gets a pass and goes in on a breakaway and scores, and the Flyers never really looked back in the series. So, I mean, even one play like that could really make or break not only just one game, but the balance of the series, because it just seemed like they started rolling after that play. So, as the bitter Penguins fan that I am, I want my replay, damn it. Danny Briere didn't score that goal. He wasn't on sides. So that's my little angry rant about instant replays. And we'll give one to Matty Duchene. He's a good kid. Jobbed him a little bit when we were talking Ryan O'Reilly. So we'll give him the pass. Sorry, Nashville fans. Sorry, Kyle. We're gonna have to keep the coach's challenge off the books for now. But wouldn't be surprised if you see a lot of bad plays, a lot of bad calls, things changing on and off there with the way the league views things. It's a very old school, traditional kind of league. So not surprised to see that the coach's challenge idea isn't getting a ton of traction. But one thing that is starting to gain a little bit of traction is perhaps either a hybrid icing or maybe even a no-touch icing call for player safety reasons, so you don't have those dramatic races for the puck, but you also don't have guys like Curtis Foster getting tripped going after an icing puck, breaking their leg, and not having their career really be the same afterwards. So what's your feelings on the no-touch or the hybrid icing?
Well, I know they tried hybrid icing back in the AHL, and I think they threw that rule out of the books. I don't think it quite worked as well as they thought it would. As far as no-touch icing, it happens in most of the minor league levels and in the OHL, and it's something that I've grown used to over the past few years, though I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think it slows the game down more often than not, even though that they want to try and improve the player safety and prevent things like what happened to Curtis Foster a few years back. I still think that no-touch icing is something that they really shouldn't go to. And granted, I don't think races to the puck are all that exciting to touch up on an icing, but you know what? You got to reward teams for going out and hustling there. There are teams that just get lazy and dump the puck out, and they just give up on the chase. I think that if they hustle for the chase on the touch-up icing, it adds an element to the game. It gives them a chance to try and attack there. So I don't like the idea of the no-touch icing. I think that icing the way it is, it's fine. I think that the other team, if they dump it in, they have the opportunity to go chase after it. It shouldn't be a free whistle, which I think some teams would use. Now, even though they don't allow line changes after an icing, you would still get some rest in those 15 seconds in between whistles. So I think if they got rid of the no-touch icing, or excuse me, if they got rid of the touch-up icing, they'd have to try and figure something out. I don't know if they could, say, put one less player in the offensive zone or, in the defensive zone when they're taking up the face-off, because if they just launch the puck down the ice, like, that's free rest. I mean, no one's chasing after the puck now. I think the way it is now, where the players don't change after the icing, I like the rule the way it is. I'm not a big fan of the no-touch ice, and I think it's going to slow the game down more often than not. Give teams a chance to try and win the puck back if they show hustle and the heart to go after it.
Yeah, and it always drives me nuts at the Otters games, especially because of the way that the rules are interpreted at the OHL level, where you see it's clearly a pass, and it just misses, or it goes between the guy's skates, or he misses the pass by, 6-10 inches, and icing, stop the game, we all got to go back to the other end. Like, it was a pass. It was an intended pass. It was right there. Like, wave that off once in a while. I do agree with you in the fact that there's a lot of stoppages in hockey, and that they're boring, and it gives free rest to the opponent. So I'm not huge on the no-touch icing. I actually was a fan of the hybrid icing, kind of as a nice go-between. You still have the race for the icing if it's close, or if the offending team does beat the defensive team back to the blue line, or to the hash marks, or the top of the face-off circles, wherever you wanted to cut the arbitrary line. But that way you still have the race. If they are chasing it, you do get that hustle and that heart and the desire factor in there. But at the same time, if it's clear that you're actually going to be wasting more time because there's nobody from the offending team within half the rink of the puck, then you might as well just blow it dead then and set up and get back going. So I was actually hoping for the hybrid icing to catch on a little bit more at the AHL level, but unfortunately it doesn't look like there'll be any changes to that at this time.
Yeah, and right now I think hybrid icing could be a nice go-between, as you said, although they stopped using it once an NHL play resumed. And I don't really think that bodes well for the opportunity of using hybrid icing in the future. Now, it does have a supporter in Wild GM Cliff Fletcher. He believes that hybrid icing is the way to go. So I hope maybe for proponents of the rule, he might have enough pull to try and convince the other GMs to make it work. And considering some of the incidents that have been out there, I think if you show them replays of those incidents, it might make them think twice about keeping the touch icing in place. It's certainly not a pretty play to look at. See Curtis Foster's leg breaking, almost in the way Joe Theisen broke his leg on Monday Night Football 20 years ago. But I think with the icing, I mean, even though it has caused some injuries, I still think you can't do no-touch icing because it really slows the pace down, and it gives, as I said, it gives the team a free pass in a sense. Even though they don't get the line change, they still get the rest almost immediately rather than trying to go after and chase the puck. And as you said, there's those errant passes time to time. You watch enough OHL hockey to notice. Sometimes there's about 5 icings in a row because of that, where they try to go for the lazy breakout pass from their own end. And I think if you do no-touch icing, and it's not going to be a very popular thought, but I think that the 2-line pass rule should be repealed as well, or I should say they bring back the red line, meaning that you do have the 2-line pass rule once again, because we see a lot of those icings occur because players can now dump it from their own end in hopes for reaching for a home run pass. I don't think you could have both no-touch icing and no 2-line pass work in the same NHL.
Well, then you've sold me on saying no to no-touch icing because boo, hiss, boo. Keep that 2-line pass rule away from me. I thought that was the worst, and I was so happy when that was gone because to have just a completely useless stoppage because some guy was a foot away from his own blue line and he hit a guy a foot inside the other blue line, it would just drive me insane. So I am now a complete antagonist to the no-touch icing. Perhaps hybrid icing could have a place in my heart. Was there anything else big from the GM meetings you wanted to touch on today, Paul?
Well, not quite. I think the big thing that's not really GM meeting related, but how about that Mike Komisarek was released by he's put on waivers by the Maple Leafs, and that is a bit of shocking news considering how much money he received a couple of years ago. But for Leafs fans, boy, they're planning the parade already. The team's in playoff position. Mike Komisarek, who's been the whipping boy for the last couple of years, potentially no longer part of the blue and white as he's been waived. And I wonder if any team might take a chance even with that big contract. There was a few years back when he looked like to be an up-and-coming defenseman, but has sort of been the poster child for bad contracts as far as the blue line is concerned. Him and Jeff Finger, both Maple Leafs. And he's now waived, and I wonder what his next stop will be.
Well, if there's any hope for him, he better hope that his next stop is Boston, just so Lucic can't beat the hell out of him anymore. God, he got just handed to him in those fights. But, I don't know. I don't think because of the way the salary cap is going down next year, supposedly, I don't think anybody's looking to take on anybody with term right now and a big contract. I would, if he was a rental, if he only had, this was the last year on his deal, I think you might see somebody take a chance on him. But as of right now, I just don't see anybody willing to pick up that tab. Was kind of surprised he got that much money when he did sign with Toronto. But as you said, they're also the culprits behind the Jeff Finger. And who? Yeah, Jeff Finger. Look him up, hockey database. He's still playing somewhere, AHL probably. He's probably been buried down there in the minors as well. So
with Tim Connolly. Tim Connolly's another guy who they overpaid that's buried in the minors right now. Just all part of the bad decisions that led to Brian Burke's departure at the start of the season.
And the same bad decisions that led to potentially the first Maple Leafs playoff team since the first lockout. So I still give Brian Burke a lot of credit for putting that team together. I mean, Lupul's been playing well. Kessel's been playing really well. I mean, Lupul had that bad injury, but he just came back. He's been scoring since he's been back. James Van Riemsdyk looks like a complete steal with Luke Schen's just ridiculous display of, I guess, defense, you could say, for the Philadelphia Flyers. I mean, that's a completely one-sided trade in my opinion. So I think Brian Burke did a good job setting him up for the future. I think the worst thing that happened to Brian Burke this year was that the lockout settled, because if Toronto, if they didn't play, they get a really high draft pick, take Nathan McKinnon, Seth Jones, they could have been really good shape for Burke going forward. But unfortunately, they got the game going, and so did Burke.
Yep, and right now they're in a playoff spot, and I like to call them the Toronto Maple Stars because of the amount of American players that are on there right now. Komisarek had been one of them, but they do have Phil Kessel, I believe. Jake Gardner, if I'm not mistaken, is an American, right? They just called him up.
Yeah, well, the funny part about Jake Gardner, did you see that his agent on Twitter was doing the hashtag Free Jake Gardner? So apparently they listened and they freed him from his role in the minors and brought him back up to the main team. And Jake Gardner's a really good young player. I don't know why they weren't utilizing him in the first place, but how do you feel about agents making personal statements on Twitter trying to influence GM decisions?
Oh boy, you know what? What are these agents gonna learn? They gotta try and make sure they don't show what they want to, what their true feelings are. But hey, if it got Jay Gardner freed, maybe more agents should take to Twitter. So that's the big story out of Toronto today is that Mike Komisarek is waived. And according to Mike Komisarek himself, it is a relief that he is waived because now he might see some regular playing time again, albeit it'll still be in Toronto, but it'll be with the Toronto Marlies of the American Hockey League. And now it's time for the unpopular thought of the week. And Jim, I'm going to let you take the lead on this one. What is your unpopular thought of the week?
Well, according to the reaction after I said this on Twitter last night, that's what actually gave me the idea for the unpopular thought of the week. But my unpopular thought this week is that Paul Martin should win the Norris Trophy this year. Now, before you start screaming obscenities at me, let me break the case down for you. Not only is this Paul Martin, who last year was awful. He was awful. Let's face it. He said he was awful. Everybody else told him he was awful too. But Ray Shero went to Paul Martin this offseason and said, Paul, if you want, I'll trade you. I'll find you a good fit. There's teams that are interested in you. I know you're a better player than you showed this past year. If you want out, I can trade you. And Paul Martin said, no, I'm not taking the easy way out. I want to stay. I'll be better. I can fix this. And Ray Shero said, well, I got to know that you're all in if I'm going to keep you because I can't have what happened last season happen again. He said, Ray, I'm all in. And since then, he's been lights out. He's been the Penguins' best puck-moving defenseman most nights. When he was hurt for 4 games, Brooks Orpik, who was getting up there, 32 years of age, defensive defenseman, not exactly a spring chicken anymore. When Paul Martin was hurt, Brooks Orpik was lost. He had probably the worst 4 games of his career while Paul Martin was out. So to bring a stabilizing force to the number 1 pair, he's playing against top lines this year. He's not starting all his shifts in the offensive zone, which means he's doing the work defensively, leading the team in both power play and penalty kill time. And the most impressive stat is Paul Martin, with 6 goals, has more goals than Evgeny Malkin, who only has 5. Paul Martin, Norris Trophy, what say you?
I don't think he's even the best Norris Trophy candidate on his team. Chris Letang is having a great year. He leads defensemen in points. He also sees regular ice time game in and game out. He probably sees the most ice time out of all the Penguins defensemen, but not by much. Has a good plus-minus rate, even though I'm not a big fan of that stat, at plus 11. But I think Chris Letang is probably a surefire Norris Trophy candidate, and I think better than Paul Martin. Now, it's a very good argument for Paul Martin. Very bad last year, as you mentioned. He was not the same player that he was when he was with the Devils that made him such a big target in free agency a few years back by the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's having a very good bounce-back year. I'll tell you what, if there was a comeback player of the year award, in a sense, it is the Masterton Trophy, but Paul Martin hasn't exactly fit the Masterton Trophy credentials. Usually have to go through some sort of tragedy or some bad event, like sort of what Max Pacioretty went through a few years back in order to get back into the game to win the Masterton Trophy. If there was a comeback player of the year, Paul Martin would be it. There's no question. He's having a terrific year, but I think Chris Letang is the candidate if you have to pick any of the Pittsburgh Penguins defensemen to potentially win the Norris Trophy. He's your man, and if you look elsewhere in the league, Oliver Ekman-Larsson is having a very nice year for the Phoenix Coyotes. Was justly rewarded a contract extension to be the rock of their blue line over the next few years. He's the best defenseman that they've had in that organization since Teppo Numminen back when they were the Jets. And if you want to look elsewhere, another guy that I like that's having a good year that I don't think will be a Norris Trophy candidate, but could be a dark horse because of how well they're playing, is Francois Beauchemin. Francois Beauchemin is having a solid year with 18 points, plus 19, and is just doing a great job in that blue line. But if I had to pick who my candidates were, I would have to go with Chris Letang, followed by Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and then a bit of a wild card there. I think Zdeno Chara, because, again, of the strong play of the Boston Bruins. And even though he hasn't quite put up the points this year, he's an intimidating force on the blue line. I think nobody plays better defensively using their size than Zdeno Chara, so he would be my other Norris Trophy candidate. Those are my three finalists so far, Letang, Ekman-Larsson, and Chara.
I'll give you Ekman-Larsson. I'll even give you Letang. I can't give you Chara this year, especially not when Chris Kunitz, who may be all of like 5'10", consistently runs Zdeno Chara all game every time the Penguins play Boston. And, he does shut down teams. Definitely made Sid's life harder over the years, but I just don't think that. I think that's too much of a reputation Norris pick for you there, Paul. I'm going Paul Martin, and Paul Martin as my three choices, and an honorary mention to Chris Letang.
You sure love Paul Martin. Is he your favorite hockey player named after a Canadian Prime Minister?
No, still not my favorite hockey player. Probably not even my favorite Penguin, but I just feel like I owe it to Paul Martin for so viciously and savagely attacking his play last year that I have to be his biggest cheerleader this year.
Well, it's good. It's a very nice story that he's been able to turn around after he's been the whipping boy for the last couple of seasons for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But I'll be shocked if he finds himself at the NHL award ceremony, unless Chris Letang ends up being more seriously hurt than they thought. I know he's back to skating and will probably play soon, but Paul Martin, like I say, he's not even the best defenseman on his own team, it's no knock on him. Chris Letang, I think, is that good. I think if Paul Martin was running the show with another team where he was a surefire leader, then I could see him being a Norris Trophy candidate, but I think he's in the shadow of Chris Letang right now.
Well, it's hard not to be in the shadow of Chris Letang's hair. It is so free-flowing and long and everywhere, so it doesn't surprise me that Paul Martin's getting overlooked because of the long-haired Chris Letang. But speaking of the Pittsburgh Penguins, recently winning against the Washington Capitals last night. A little bit of a squeaker, a 2-1 victory over a desperate Capitals team who is really fighting for their playoff lives right now, but not fighting very well. And the Penguins pick up their 10th win in a row, doing it without Evgeny Malkin, doing it without Chris Letang, and doing it mostly on the play of Paul Martin and Matt Niskanen last night with the two big goals. For the tire and the winner for the Penguins. So good to see the Penguins getting it done in unusual ways, you might say. A very solid win for them this past week against Boston as well, using their backup goaltender in Thomas Vokoun, and still managing to triumph over Tuukka Rask and the Boston Bruins.
Well, the Eastern Conference needs somebody to take the lead right now, and the Pittsburgh Penguins are doing just that. In the Western Conference, you have the Blackhawks and the Ducks that have been doing so well from the start of the year. The Penguins, in a way, stumbled out of the gate, but now they have that 10-game winning streak, and there's just so much depth from top to bottom on that team. And when Chris Kunitz is one of the points leaders in the NHL, that's saying something. He never really put that much production on the board when he was with Anaheim, but hey, whenever you're with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, your points are going to increase, and he's receiving the benefits of that right now. But this is a solid team from top to bottom, and right now they're easily the class of the Eastern Conference. Although the Montreal Canadiens are up there in points, they have their struggles from time to time. They actually lost to Buffalo yesterday in overtime. They had to come from behind to force overtime, which is a credit to them, but Montreal has been prone to giving up points against an opponent that is inferior to them. And I will say that Buffalo, yes, is an inferior team to Montreal. And Montreal, I thought, should have had a regulation win in their building if they want to prove they're among the elite in the Eastern Conference. But right now I think there's only one elite team, and that's the Pittsburgh Penguins. It pains me to say that as a lifelong Rangers fan. But right now the Penguins are the team to beat in the Eastern Conference, and there's no signs of slowing them down. It's amazing what a healthy Sidney Crosby can do for a team's chances.
Yeah, and as a Penguins fan, it's just really great to see a healthy Sidney Crosby with how scary that injury was, with the length of time that he was out, and the prognosis just getting really bleaker and bleaker as time went on, and to see him come back and make such great strides and go back to the 1.6 point per game pace, tearing up the league that he was even before he was hurt. So great to see Sid back, great to see him healthy. Hopefully, Malcolm skating, getting closer to getting back. Maybe even see him as early as Friday against the Islanders. So it'll be nice to get the team back to full strength, and just really great to see a lot of young kids stepping in to help out for the Penguins as well, with Bo Bennett playing some top 6 minutes, as well as Simone Dupre and Robert Bortuzzo really solidifying the back end for the Penguins there. And this Simone Dupre, he went from playing him because they wanted to trade him for a winger and trying to do all these things with Simone Dupre, and he's played himself right into the lineup. And if I had my way, he would be in the lineup every night. I think you're looking at a player developing along the same kind of path as a Chris Letang. I mean, he's not as fast as Chris Letang, but he's a bit more physical, hits quite well. Also, great positioning, never seems to get lost, always knows what he's doing with the puck when he gets it. So I was very worried. There was a scare where he left practice early the one day, and I thought he was being traded. And I was just sitting at my desk at work with my head in my hands, thinking if it's not Bobby Ryan coming back the other way, this trade is a loss. But great to see Dupre really stepping it up, and we'd love to see him grow into a potential top D pair for the Penguins.
Well, Dupre is an impressive player who has been given the opportunity to try to succeed in Pittsburgh, and he's done quite well with it, which is great to see. He was their first-round pick back in 2009, and like Letang, is a product of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, and it's amazing to see how the Penguins just seem to have these homegrown players that are successful for them, and Ray Shero's done a good job of building that squad, not only through their prospects but also through trades. A guy we haven't mentioned yet is James Neal, and boy, they look great in that trade every night when you see what's happening to the Dallas Stars. I remember a month back during one of our podcasts, Alex Goligoski was a healthy scratch, and James Neal is one of the top offensive players in that Penguins team, which has a ton of top offensive players. So it's just a testament to the work that Ray Shero has done in building this squad. They're homegrown guys, across the board, but very shrewd deals made and bringing some talent in, such as James Neal, such as Thomas Vokoud, who was signed as a free agent to back up Marc-Andre Fleury. It's a deal you don't really think much about because he is a backup goaltender, but when you're faced with the prospect of having Brent Johnson or Thomas Vokoud spell Marc-Andre Fleury every night, you feel much safer with Thomas Vokoud. And he's in a very good situation there as the backup to Marc-Andre Fleury, who could see some time if he needs to, just in case Marc-Andre Fleury, if God forbid for Penguins fans, he got hurt. Thomas Vokoud is very capable to step up as the number one if needed. So lots of good moves made by Ray Shero over the last few years to bring the Penguins towards their fourth Stanley Cup, which is what they're going for this year, and lots of young players are in the pipeline that could step up in the future. We see a few of them in the OHL ranks between Olli Määttä and Scott Harrington of the London Knights. Harrington was just named as the best defensive defenseman in the Western Conference by coaches, which is an impressive stat. And you mentioned Bo Bennett. Bo Bennett is really starting to turn it on offensively, so he's pushing all the right buttons right now, and it'll be interesting to see if they decide to make some moves at the deadline, because no team is perfect, even teams that win 10 games in a row like the Penguins. There might be something that he wants to try and fix with that team. Obviously, he can't rearrange it too much. You don't want to disrupt the chemistry of it, but if he wants to get another gritty guy in there to help things out, I think he can go for the move. But Ray Shero's pushed the right buttons for that team, and just because we have to mention him, because we haven't yet, but this is for your friend, Brandon Sutter. He has really turned it on lately. We haven't talked much about him, but Brandon Sutter is turning into the player they hoped he would be when they traded for him in the Jordan Staal deal.
Yeah, I was going to say she was definitely going to kill us if we spent all this time on the Penguins and didn't even mention her BFF there, Brandon Sutter. But no, Brandon Sutter has looked great recently. Basically carried the team in that game against Boston. They're down 2-0 the entire game. Nothing's going right. Kunitz gets one, and then Sutter buries two, and they go on to win 3-2, which I think everyone in the world, including the backup goaltender Hudobin, Qdoba, Chipotle, whatever you want to call him, he was looking at a 2-on-1 with Brandon Sutter and Sidney Crosby coming down, and he's thinking pass all the way, and Brandon Sutter just snipes him. So it was great to see. Huge win at home against the Boston Bruins. Nice to see him take 2 games against the Bruins. in the stretch where they've gone 10-0, and just great play out of him recently. Great on the faceoffs, great on the penalty kill. I mean, he's really stepped in to fill the role for Jordan Stahl. Even self-professed Jordan Stahl fans like myself and my dad are really starting to just completely warm up to Brandon Sutter and starting to let go. I might have to even retire my Jordan Stahl T-shirt that I wore to work today. So might have to put him out the pasture and go buy me a Brandon Sutter jersey.
Well, Brandon Sutter is one of the many reasons that the Penguins have succeeded this year. But as we talk about the class of the Eastern Conference, big showdown tonight as we're recording this podcast. In the Western Conference, Ducks and Blackhawks, the two teams that are the class of the Western Conference right now, are going at it. And even though the Blackhawks have stumbled a bit after that great unbeaten streak that they had to start the year, losing of all teams to Colorado, currently occupies last place in the Western Conference. But boy, the Ducks seem to get it done, and we'll touch on the Ducks first because they made some moves over the last couple of weeks to retain two of their top players with big deals, guys who I hope if I run into in the street are going to buy me a steak dinner. Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry, they're going to get paid about $8.5 million per year for almost the next decade, each player, to stay in Southern California. And I'll tell you what, that's a lot of money to commit to two players, two very talented players. We touched on Ryan Getzlaf before in the past. Corey Perry is, I think, worth most of that money. He's a very good offensive player. He's got a great shot, good at finishing around the net. But where does that leave the Ducks over the next few years? You got Teemu Selanne and Saku Koivu, who are more than likely heading towards retirement. They're both in their final years of their respective contracts. And if the cap goes down, this is a team that could find itself in cap hell and might be very top-heavy in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the most interesting things with those two signings is if you look at the cap hits in the league right now, there's only 4 players over an annual cap hit of $8 million. Of course, you have Alexander Ovechkin, cough, cough, amnesty buyout, cough, at $9.538 million per year on the cap. Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby both at $8.7 million a year, and then Eric Stahl at $8.25. So now your 4th and 5th highest cap hit players in the league next season are going to be Corey Perry and Ryan Getzlaf. And while I do like both players, and you can really thank Brian Burke, who was probably pretty poised to pick those two up in free agency for Toronto. If they would have kept them around as the general manager, he might have actually had a pretty good shot, considering how close those three are. But he takes the job with the Anaheim Ducks, and you got to wonder if part of the condition for him signing on as the Anaheim Ducks front office worker there was that he was going to have a lot of sway and a lot of influence to get Corey Perry and Ryan Getzlaf to stay. But for me, it's just kind of surprising in the fact that, yeah, Corey Perry and Ryan Getzlaf may be worth $8.5 million for the next 3-4 years. But you got to figure on the tail end of those deals, when their production isn't as high, you're really going to be crippling your team, waiting, trying to get young talent at low prices to play with them, because those are some serious cap hits for some older than you would think players.
Well, it's almost as if they didn't learn their lesson from contracts in the past, and we talked about Rick DiPietro in the past. Granted, apples and oranges, Rick DiPietro has never really been an elite goaltender, whereas Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry have been among the best of their respective groups in terms of play. They are both fantastic players, but I still think they're overpaid. That's a big cap hit when you consider the amount of players that are making that money in the NHL. Not very many, but yeah, it's almost as if Corey Perry and Ryan Getzlaf are considered among the top 5 players in the NHL, or top 10 for that matter. And I don't think either of them are. I think that there are better players than those two. That's a lot of money to commit. I'm worried about what that's going to do for the rest of the player contracts in the NHL, especially with the potentially shrinking salary cap. there's going to be some players that are going to want that Perry and Getzlaff money that might not get it because teams are going to be afraid to spend that if the cap does indeed shrink. So I think those contracts could be potentially harmful to the NHL, especially when you consider their age, like you mentioned. You look at Alexander Ovechkin; he could have an amnesty buyout because he, quite frankly, hasn't shown that he deserves that $9.5 million per year at the way he's played. He's not producing at the level he once was. Now, it is impressive. He's already at 700 points in his career, considering he's played less than 10 years in the NHL. But these long contracts, more often than not, they either get bought out or traded or restructured. And I'm very surprised that Anaheim is holding on to these two for as long, or intending to keep on to these two for as long as 8 years, because I can't see either of them finishing their contracts, especially with the way that the salary cap is structured and the fact that they could break down. It has happened. So, you look at Scott Gomez as an example. He got $7.5 million a year, long contract, ends up getting bought out by the Montreal Canadiens this year. Now, it wasn't the Canadiens that gave him the contract. It is their fault because they did trade for it, unbelievably. But there are so many examples that you could think of these long contracts with a lot of money that just doesn't work. You can't name very many of them. I mean, the only one that could work right now is Sidney Crosby, because he's one of the top 5 players in the league. That's the only way I could see it working, is if they're one of the top 5 players in the league. Now, granted, Ovechkin was one of the top 5 players in the league. He hasn't played like it over the last couple of seasons. But, it was just a super long contract. It was more than 8 years. I believe it was 13, if I'm not mistaken. So they're trying to stay away from these longer contracts. I know that there's a cap on the years with the new CBA, but I'm not a fan of dumping all this money into two players that I don't feel are in the top 10 of the NHL. I think it's very worrisome, and I think it's going to create a bit of heartache for some of the players who are going to try and make more money and really try to get the most out of the teams that they're trying to offer their services for, and the GMs are going to be really handcuffed to try and figure out how to make these players happy while maintaining the salary cap. And those contracts, I feel, are very harmful towards the current CBA.
Well, I'm at hand here with Anaheim. Now with the amnesty buyout, what is it, one a year, I believe, maybe 3, you will see both of them being amnesty bought out. So, they have kind of written themselves a backdoor escape there for these contracts. So it's definitely a weird situation. I don't know why, Corey Perry wouldn't have tested the market, because he might have actually been able to get even more than what he did end up with in Anaheim. And, for him to stay, that's great short term, but you got to wonder what that's going to do long term for the Anaheim Ducks. But big matchup tonight against Chicago. Maybe we'll see who the true class of the West is tonight, after having the big showdown between Boston and Pittsburgh in the East. We get to find out just exactly what the Western Conference is made of tonight with the Chicago Blackhawks against the Anaheim Ducks. And that is a home game for Anaheim. So you got to figure matchups are going their way, especially with their almost ridiculous 12-1 record at home this year. So Anaheim might be the good bet tonight to put one more regulation loss up on the Chicago Blackhawks.
Well, Anaheim is a very good team, and part of the reason is because of the players that have contributed, old and young. You've got Teemu Selanne and Saku Koivu, who seem to be ageless wonders, especially Teemu Selanne, still at the top of his game, even though he's over 40 years old. We mentioned Corey Perry and Ryan Getzlaff. Bobby Ryan is another one of the players that have contributed well. And they got the younger guys that are starting to step up. I mentioned Francois Beauchemin, even though he's not a younger guy, who's done a very good job on the blue line this year for the Anaheim Ducks. But the young guys that I'm referring to are Nick Bonino and Kyle Palmieri. Those are two guys that have really started to step it up offensively. This is a Ducks team that gets contributions from their top three lines, and they've gotten very good goaltending from Victor Foss, and Jonas Hiller are starting to pick things up a bit lately. He struggled at the start of the year. Victor Foss looked like at a time was going to steal the number one job for him. Now it looks like they have two very capable number ones on that squad, and they just re-signed Victor Foss to a 2-year extension because of his great start in the NHL since coming over from Sweden. So the Ducks, like the Penguins, are a very solid team from top to bottom. We've always talked about the Blackhawks, I think, on every podcast so far, so we'll try and get away from a little Windy City love there. But all three of those teams are set up very well for success this season because they get contributions from their top three lines. They have solid goaltender, and they get production from their blue line. They're also physical. They're all physical teams. They can punish you night in and night out, and I think that's a bit understated. If you're a team that's soft, you're not going to get very far in the playoffs. You need to be able to take the punishment, and you need to be able to dish it out as well. And I think all three of those teams do a very good job of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're going to see a lot of that fire and a lot of that grit tonight. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you see some fireworks with the way those two teams are assembled. So definitely going to be a good game tonight. Hopefully, hopefully it's not a blowout one way or the other. But we'll have San Jose, Edmonton, and Dallas, Colorado to flip to on the good old center ice tonight, just in case things go south. Also on the game schedule tonight is our favorite topic, Wednesday night rivalry night, with the tremendous rivalry that is the Minnesota Wild visiting the Detroit Red Wings. Even before the game, they had a little segment on NBC Sports Network with Michelle Beadle and Jeremy Roenick comparing the two cities, and they were just desperate, trying to find some reason to call this a rivalry. And the reason they were so desperate is because Minnesota doesn't have any rivals.
They don't, and really, I call the rivalry the Detroit Red Wings versus the World rivalry. It's just a reason to get the Detroit Red Wings on television, and it's a tough thing to sell, and I don't know how you can compare the cities of Minnesota and Detroit. And even though they both have teams in the same division in the NFL, you never call the Lions and the Vikings rivals. So how could you call the Wild and the Red Wings rivals? Now, you look at the other games that are on the schedule tonight, there's really nothing close that's even a rivalry. So unfortunately, it's really the best that they could do. If Dallas and Colorado were better teams like 10 years ago when they did have some good battles in the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken, perhaps that could have been the rivalry game. But Dallas and Colorado are both in the pits in the Western Conference. So right now they're just grasping for straws here. Granted, Minnesota has got some good talent and been on the radar of many NHL fans because of the acquisitions of Ryan Suter and Zach Parise in the offseason. The Detroit Red Wings are always going to be the Red Wings. They're always going to be a television draw, even though that they've lost some talent over the past few years. Nick Lidstrom retiring, Steve Yzerman retiring long ago. Brendan Shanahan was once on that team. Tomas Holmstrom retired this past offseason. But they still got some great players such as Pavel Datsyuk. He's always going to draw you in. Maybe he'll be capable of a few highlight reel plays on national TV, as he's always able to do, it seems, whenever the Red Wings are on television. But boy, I would love to have seen that segment just to see what they would have said, because this is a tough thing to sell. The Minnesota Wild are still a young team. They were created just 13 years ago. Their first season was in 2000, but still no real rivals. And hopefully it'll be cultivated with their with the realignment next year. I could see them and Winnipeg possibly being a rivalry, because Winnipeg's closest opponent, I do believe, are the Minnesota Wild. So maybe that could be cultivated as part of the realignment. They'll see more of each other. They don't see each other this year. They'll see a lot of each other next year. When I think of rivalries with Detroit, I think of the Blackhawks. Now, that's going to be broken up by realignment. But I also think of the St. Louis Blues and even the Toronto Maple Leafs. They used to be rivals way back when, until they split conferences. So, hopefully with this rivalry Wednesday, we'll see better matchups next year. Right now, they're a little bit handcuffed because of the shortened schedule and the fact that Wednesday night's not really premier night for NHL action. You see an average of 3-4 games on a Wednesday night compared to 9 or 10 on a Saturday or a Tuesday.
Yeah, it is kind of an off night. But speaking of future rivalries, with the Penguins and Columbus being so close geographically, might be a good rivalry starting up there next year, with both of those teams being in the same division. And while talking about the Columbus Blue Jackets, very interesting. The Columbus Blue Jackets have not lost in regulation in the last 10 games, points in their last 11. What has happened to the Columbus Blue Jackets? Who are these men, and what have they done with the Columbus Blue Jackets?
Well, they've gotten some good goaltending from a guy that I'm sure Paul Holmgren wished he still had in his roster, and that's Sergei Bobrovsky. He has been the man in net. He has played really well, and it looks like he has solidified that number one role in Columbus. They've been looking for a number one goaltender for a while. They thought they had one in Steve Mason after he won the Calder Trophy, but he hasn't been back to form since. Sergei Bobrovsky has come in, and he's given his team a chance to win every night. And they've also started to get some contributions from their younger guys. Brandon Dubinsky recently came back to the lineup, and another player that's a former Ranger, Artem Anisimov, has played really well for them. But they're getting contributions from top to bottom, and I think really a big key to their success is Sergei Bobrovsky. He has been very strong in net, and you remember that run that they did get to go to a playoff spot a few years back. Their only playoff appearance to date was because they had strong goaltending from Steve Mason that year, and because they have that strong goaltending now at Sergei Bobrovsky, he's going to give them a real chance at a playoff spot, which is quite impressive because 3 weeks ago, I believe, they were still mired in last place of the Western Conference, and now they're literally tied for a playoff spot. Not quite tied, but they are within very close, or they are in striking distance. They're right there.
Yeah, they actually are tied for 8th. San Jose and Phoenix all tied at 30 points. Columbus has played 2 more games than San Jose, though, so they're in 10th with the tiebreakers.
Yeah, so they're right there, even though they were in last place not too long ago. But then again, it speaks to how wacky this season is because of the shortened season, because the loser points now put into play. There was no overtime/loser point back in 1995 when there was last a shortened season. It gives teams like the Columbus Blue Jackets a chance, and I'd like to see them succeed. They've got a very nice rink down there that I still want to visit in a great area, the Arena District. They've got some exciting players on this team, and I think if marketed right, they can become a big thing in Columbus. They just want to root for a winner. They're tired of not seeing the team succeed in their 13-year history, but hopefully they can get some more success down the line and manage to sneak into a playoff spot, which is very possible in the topsy-turvy NHL lockout shortened season this year.
Yeah, they might even get to be the 8th seed and get steamrolled by Chicago. Actually, they do. They match up fairly well with Chicago. I'm giving Chicago a hard time this year in their games, but don't worry, Paul, and we'll get you moved down to Pittsburgh. We'll get big Columbus and New York and Penguins all playing games in Columbus. Well, we'll go out for some games out into that beautiful Arena District out there in Columbus. And, I might have to double dip on my unpopular thought of the week here, but what say you to this fact? Perhaps Columbus Blue Jackets have actually won the Rick Nash trade, even though they gave up the best player. I mean, Rick Nash has been very good for the New York Rangers this year, but going into tonight, the Rangers are sitting at 32 points, 8th seed in the East, and there's Columbus at 30 points, tied for the 8th seed in the West. So, I mean, when you think of where the Rangers were last year and where Columbus was last year, for them to be in the same kind of middling position at this time of the season, granted the strange season it's been, but I mean, when you lose heart and soul guys off of that Rangers team, like Dubinsky, like Artem Anisimov, it might not be as lopsided as we once thought.
That is true, but again, I think that Columbus still lost that trade because of how much they wanted initially. They wanted to get Ryan McDonough, Chris Kreider, and a pick for Rick Nash, and they ended up getting much less than that. Now, granted, all 3 of those players that they received in return are going to make positive contributions on that team. Now, granted, they haven't put up a lot of offense this year, but Artem Anisimov and Brandon Dubinsky have made positive contributions, and Tim Eriksson's going to be a very good blue liner down the road. He's receiving regular ice time in Columbus compared to not being even on the team's depth chart in New York. He was stuck in Connecticut throughout most of his Rangers time. The sole reason for the Blue Jackets' success so far, aside from the balanced squad, is Sergei Bobrovsky. But I think because the Blue Jackets wanted to get more for Rick Nash and did not, I still think they lost the trade. I think they could have gotten more for Rick Nash, even though the Rangers right now are battling for a playoff spot when they were expected to be among the elite in the East. Rick Nash, I think, has played very well. I think now that we've seen the talent that he's surrounded with in New York compared to what he had to deal with in Columbus all those years, he's capable of doing a lot of things. But they did lose the heart and soul guys like Brandon Dubinsky, like Artem Anisimov. But the one player that I think they really missed that they really have yet to replace is Brandon Pruss. Now, I think Montreal overpaid for him, but Brandon Pruss was sort of the unsung hero on that Rangers team. He did all the little things that you want to see from a player that you sort of forget about. He's not going to put up a lot of points, but he was a great penalty killer. He can get under the team's skin without taking bad penalties. He did a lot to try and amp up the energy for that Rangers team, and I think they miss him more than anyone that they gave up or let walk away through free agency this year, and he wasn't involved in the Rick Nash deal.
No, and Brandon Pruss will always be famous to me for being the softest player in the NHL because Jordan Stahl hit him with a glove, left-handed swipe. I'd even barely, I wouldn't even feel right calling it a punch. And Mr. Pruss looked like he'd been shot in the face. His head actually snapped the wrong way as he fell to the ice and crumpled like the whiny little baby that he is. But that sucks that you lost him. I'm sorry you liked him. He's gone. And, you know, kind of your Ranger fan bias there wouldn't let you admit that you lost the Rick Nash trade. But the really interesting thing going on with the New York Rangers right now is Coach John Tortorella. And whether he will be the coach for much longer is very interesting because at this point, I don't know if you had seen the press conference, but at one point after a loss this past week, the media was asking Coach Torch some questions, and he actually turned it right on the players and said, well, why don't you go in the room and ask those guys? Do they have answers for you? I don't. And it's those guys, not us, not the team anymore. So it looks like John Tortorella may have thrown his team under the proverbial bus and is distancing himself from their play. And when you lose the locker room like that, I don't know how you're going to be an effective coach for much longer.
Well, that's a very good point there, Jim. With John Tortorella, he has brought success to the Rangers where he's been able to get the team to work hard. They were able to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. But I think part of the reason for the Rangers not doing as well this year is that the target was on their backs. They were under the radar last year. Nobody expected them to get where they were last year, be among the best teams in the NHL, and make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. This year, they're expected to win the Eastern Conference, potentially go to the Stanley Cup Finals. And now because everybody's focused on them, people want to go into Madison Square Garden and say that they were the team to beat the Rangers. And when you have that target on your back, it's very difficult to fend off that pressure. I think it's really getting to the Rangers right now. Now, they have dealt with their fair share of injuries. Losing Mark Stahl has certainly hurt. They haven't quite been the same since he was hit in the face with that puck. They've really struggled since then. They were trying to build a run back then. I think that was when they had their last, or so far really only big winning streak of the season, was when he got hurt. So John Tortorella right now, he's definitely on the hot seat, and I think that if he will last through the remainder of the year. If they make the playoffs and get swept or a quick exit in the first round, I think he's going to be gone. But I think we'd see it if they make the playoffs. If he goes to the second round, he'll still be a part of the team next year. But if they miss the playoffs or are out quickly in the first round, I think he might be looking for new employment. But when you look at some of the other situations around in the NHL, I don't think he's going to look for employment for long. He's got a Stanley Cup ring to his credit. He's had success with both of the teams that he's coached, Rangers included. So John Tortorella, his style is not for everybody, but he's a disciplinarian, and right now his message is not getting through this Rangers team, and they might need a new voice in there, but I just don't think it's going to come. I think it's going to come later rather than sooner.
Yeah, I mean, you don't throw away a guy like John Tortorella. He's a great coach, and he certainly would be on the short list for being hired by almost any team in the NHL. I mean, even though he's a bit of a fireball, a little bit of a spitfire, he can get under people's skin and on people's nerves. But he is a great coach. He's had success everywhere he's went, so I'm not worried about John Tortorella if the Rangers decide to relieve him of his duties. Just don't think he'll be looking for work too long, and you got a guy like Lindy Ruff sitting out there as well. So any of these coaches that are on the hot seat, that seat's getting a little bit hotter because there are some quality options out there if a team does decide to make a move at this point. And part of this is still going to fall on the players too. I mean, Brad Richards isn't having a great year. Marian Gaborik, fairly average at this time. I haven't really this year, but another interesting story coming out of New York State is what's going on with the Buffalo Sabres right now. You had Patrick Coletta who hit Brad Richards, earning himself that 5-game suspension, and he comes back off the suspension, able to play, and Coach Ron Ralston says, yeah, I know you're eligible to play. You're still not playing. So there's a dynamic going on there. He actually came out, article in the press, pretty much whined and complained about the fact that the team needs energy and he wants to play and he can provide energy. Well, he should provide some scoring looking at his 0 goals for this year, but it also didn't sit very well with his goaltender, Ryan Miller, who actually, and I quote, didn't appreciate his candor, saying, we're not even discussing what Patty says, you guys. That's just drama, and he needs to just grow up if he's going to say that to you guys. You know what? He had a stupid play in a game. He sat. He was punished. He needs to get over it and move on. We've handled it. He doesn't have to go to you guys and say that stuff. There, I'm addressing it now, and I'll go and talk to him about it. There's no reason to say that. So, Ryan Miller not happy with his teammates. Ryan Miller kind of emo, not happy in general. But what's going on with the Buffalo Sabres right now?
Now, they're just a little bit of disarray. They did get a win last night against the Montreal Canadiens on the road, and I think one of the players that might need to watch himself is Ryan Miller. He's run his mouth quite a bit so far this year. And Jonas Enroth, in his last 2 starts, has looked quite impressive. Actually, no, he's looked good in his last 3 starts. He didn't get a decision against the Devils a few weeks back, but he's gotten wins his last 2 starts. He won last night against Montreal. He won last week and looking very impressive against the Rangers at home. And Ryan Miller has been up and down so far this year. He hasn't really been quite the same goaltender that we saw back in the Olympics in 2010 with Team USA. And I think he's a guy who might be in his final days as a Buffalo Sabre. I think improved all that. Should definitely consider trading him because even though they are 6 points out of a playoff spot, I think they can get a lot for Ryan Miller. With Ron Ralston right now, I almost think he's a lame duck coach. He's got the interim tag, and I don't think that's going to be removed. The team hasn't improved all that much since he's taken over behind the bench. It's tough for him because there's not much time for him to try and fix things, but there hasn't been a noticeable sign of improvement where you could say, oh, hey, this team could have a shot at a good run. They were supposed to have a very good year, but right now there's just nothing that indicates that, hey, we're scared of the Buffalo Sabres. I don't think they exactly strike fear from you night in and night out. And it's a team that right now is just a mess right now in the locker room, on the ice. It was nice to see him get a win last night, but even though they are so close to a playoff spot, just as seemingly everyone else is in the NHL, they haven't been all that of an impressive team, and they might have to consider making some moves and focus on being contenders in the future.
Yeah, and you got to think that with Ryan Miller being 32 years of age, not really playing his best hockey right now, what is the market out there for a guy like Ryan Miller? I mean, obviously, you look at his past performance, maybe a change in scenery would do him well, but, I mean, who really is going to be in the market for Ryan Miller that is going to, A, want to give up what Buffalo is going to ask for, and B, really needs him right now? I mean, he's not the goaltender that he was in the Olympics. He's not the goaltender that he was when he won the Vezina Trophy. As much as I hate to say it about, a great American hockey hero putting the team on his back in the Olympics, he just doesn't have it right now. And I don't know that a change in scenery is going to make all that much of a difference. And where are you going to put him? You're going to isolate him out in Edmonton, San Jose, Dallas? I mean, who really needs a goaltender that's desperate enough to take a chance on Ryan Miller right now? So, I don't know. It's a difficult situation. He's not winning. He's not happy. But at the same time, I don't really know that there's a whole lot of call for his services right now, and maybe he should just shut up and play better. Speaking of other potential big trades, Jerome McGinley has his name obviously comes up anytime you're talking trade deadline, with him being in the final year of his contract. And some rumors about what the asking price is for Jerome McGinley. I've heard a roster player, a top defenseman prospect, and a pick, which is pretty high for a rental player, especially, what's McGinley now, 36, and not having the most incredible powerhouse of the season. Kind of a notorious slow starter, but at the same time, is that a package that you'd be willing to move for Jerome McGinley?
No, Jerome McGinley, Grant, is a nice player. He's one of the best players in the NHL over the past 10 years or so, but I'm not sure if you could justify spending that much to get a player of his caliber. There's certainly some other nice options that are cheaper out there. An option that I would consider, who was having a very good year with the Islanders, unless the Islanders feel that they could potentially make a run at a playoff spot, is Brad Boyce. He's having a great bounce-back year. Only $1 million he's getting paid this year. I mean, that's one of the best contracts that anyone's received this year. 1 year, $1 million. He struggled with the Buffalo Sabres, but now that he's getting that top six ice time that he had so desired with the Sabres and that he succeeded with back when he was with the St. Louis Blues, Brad Boyce is having a very nice bounce back here, and he's younger, just 30 years of age. Jerome McGinley's 35 right now. He's only put up 20 points this year, which for him is lower, but it's not that bad. But I can't justify paying that much to get a player of his caliber. You look at the teams that are sort of middling right now, and I can't think of many teams that would justify paying that much in order to get him. I think if you want to get a rental that could potentially make an impact on your team, I would look at Brad Boyce if the Islanders are willing to part with him, if they can get something of value in return for him. You don't have to give up that much. He's only getting paid $1 million this year, but he is putting up the offense this year at a better rate than Jerome McGinley and much younger.
Yeah, and plus former Erie Otter, he's always going to have a lot of points in our book, that's for certain. Definitely glad to see him having a great season. Always liked him when I was a young man growing up in the Erie watching the Otters play. Him and Corey Pecker were always my favorites. So it was great to see him bounce back this year. Unfortunately, it is for the hated New York Islanders for both of us. But glad to see Brad doing well. Another interesting option on the market, I'm not sure that he's technically on the market, but with Dallas being so far in the tank right now, interesting to see what they do with Brendan Morrow, their captain actually. But there's rumors that they're looking to move him too. And if I'm Ray Shero for the Penguins, that's kind of the type of guy that I'm looking for. Kind of a gritty, hard-nosed player, not out of place in the top six, but would fit in well on a third line, like a rough checking line, and can actually chip in some offense, riding shotgun with Brandon Sutter. So if I'm Ray Shero, and give a shout out to my buddy Brian who brought that to my attention. But if I'm Ray Shero, who already has a history of fleecing the Dallas Stars in trades, I don't know what kind of blackmail he has against Joe Nieuwendyk, but you might as well fire up the old blackmail machine and see if you can't sneak Brendan Morrow out of Dallas. Just a pick, not even a prospect.
Well, Brandon Morrow is getting a little bit long there in the tooth at 34, but he's one of the better penalty killers in the NHL, and he's got that C on his jersey. We know he can be a good leader for any team that decides to acquire him. I think the Rangers should definitely consider trying to go after him, because he might be able to fill the void that was left by Brandon Prust, as he is a gritty player. He has a lot more offensive touch than Brandon Prust has ever showed, and he's a very solid penalty killer, which the Rangers are kind of lacking right now. Even though the Rangers' penalty kill has been pretty good, they still want to find that defensive forward that's going to help them be accountable at all ends of the ice. I think Brandon Morrow could be that guy. He'd be a nice fit for I think almost any team that acquires him. His cap hit's only $4 million this year, so he's not all that expensive. He's had a very solid NHL career. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the National Hockey League, and the Dallas Stars are certainly in a lot of trouble right now, and I think they'd be wise to try and see what they can get for him, because this is a very good all-around player who could play in all three zones, has shown offensive ability, and is a very good penalty killer. Those guys are hard to find.
Yeah, that's certainly something the Penguins could use some help on right now. They started off with a pretty good penalty kill this year, but dropped into the bottom third of the league. I believe they're rated like 22nd overall right now on their penalty kills, so wouldn't be a bad idea for them to pick up another great penalty killer as well. So back off, Paul. I called Brendan Morrow for the Penguins first. You can go waste a bunch of picks and prospects for Jerome McGinley and miss the playoffs. Now, after the other thing I did want to talk about with Corey Perry that I forgot to mention earlier, I did want to get your opinion on the hit on Jason Zucker that actually got Corey Perry suspended for 4 games. Not probably considered an injurious attempt to injure, more like I'm going to hit this guy. I know it's probably a bad idea, but I'm going to do it anyway. What did you think of the 4 games for Corey Perry?
Well, I think it might have been a little bit too much, but they want to try and protect the younger players that are out there. And, it's a fortunate hit that happened, but I think it was a little bit too much. I thought 2 games would have been a worthy suspension instead of 4.
Yeah, I was kind of in the 2 to 3 range myself on that one. I was pretty surprised when animatronic Rob Blake came out and dropped the 4-game suspension on him. But is there a little bit of time left in the podcast today to make fun of the Flyers as they sit down there, in 12th position, 27 points, and not really doing anything. 4-6 in their last 10, 4-12 on the road, and minus 11 goal differential. Do you want to take any pot shots at the Flyers today?
Well, we talked about the hot seat earlier, but I would think that Paul Holmgren and Peter Laviolette are both on the hot seat right now, even though Laviolette got the Laviolette got the death knell. He was told that his job was safe. When we all know that when you follow sports for so many years, it means exactly the opposite. I think if they continue their losing ways, Peter Laviolette will not finish out the year with the Flyers, because this is a team that has so much talent, yet it just hasn't put. They haven't been able to put things together. And part of that is inconsistency with goaltending. I think I mentioned it before. They signed Ilya Bryzgalov to that huge contract, which didn't make any sense. He was a product of that system in Phoenix. They made Mike Smith look like a good goaltender. I think you would be a good goaltender in that Coyote system, and yet Ilya Bryzgalov gets a
fantastic floor hockey goaltender, sir. You watch your mouth.
Yeah, well, you know what? I mean, besides that, it's just that Ilya Bryzgalov's humongous big contract is not being validated right now. I think he has a possibility to be bought out on the amnesty buyout, which I was hoping to save for our next show, but I'm going to say it right now. Ilya Bryzgalov is not going to finish out that contract with the Philadelphia Flyers. It's not that bold of a statement, but I could see them buying it out next year, because I don't know what he's done to prove that he's earned that money. And the Flyers, I think, need to look elsewhere and try and find somebody new behind the bench. Paul Holmgren has just, I mean, granted, they made the finals a few years back, but he's made so many baffling decisions that they're in ways they're Mike Milbury-esque with how bad they are. That's my pot shot at the Flyers.
Wow, that's some pretty harsh words. The real confusion I have with the Flyers is, how they continue to try to sign these ridiculous contracts. If Chris Pronger ever actually retired, even though he's never going to play again, unfortunately, hate him as a Flyer, but I've always loved Chris Pronger as a great hockey player. But if he would retire like he should, they would be so hosed on the cap situation, because they signed him to that ridiculous contract when he was over 35. So the only thing that's saving him right now, saving that team, is that he's still on long-term injury reserve, and it's kind of a wink-wink, nudge-nudge situation between Holmgren and Chris Pronger that he's not going to retire until that contract runs up, because they would just put them in complete dire straits. So the only good thing I can say about the Flyers right now is that the ginger line of Voracek, Giroux, and Hartnell is very good, and it's very difficult to stop. But
that's a good line.
Right now, the team as it's constructed underneath that, guys just not playing up to their potential. I mean, and Zach Rinaldo's your third-line center. Oh. Zach Rinaldo?
He's a plug.
Simone Gagne, Sean Couturier, and Matt Reed are fourth-line players on this team right now. I mean, what happened to these players that just embarrassed the Penguins last year?
Well, they traded one of them for Luke Shen, and we want to talk about trades that end up becoming lopsided. I think that's one of them. James Van Riemsdyk has really blown up in Toronto this year. He's a big reason for their success.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been fantastic for Toronto and absolutely miserable, the Flyers defense right now with Coburn as their number one guy, Luke Shen in the number one pair as well, and then Kimmo Timonen, who's always been what I consider to be the Flyers' best defenseman outside of Chris Pronger, is now on the third pair with Bruno Gervais, who the only reason he's there is because he's BFFs with Max Talbot. I mean, it's not a very exciting lineup right now, and just kind of surprised, how bad they are now, considering how a similar lineup was so good last year. Maybe Matt Carl was worth more than I ever thought.
Even though he's not having that great of a year at Tampa Bay, I just dumped him off my fantasy team.
Thank God. It's about time. Clean up your house down there.
Ryan Clough is still on it, though. I have to get rid of him soon.
Yeah, he's a fantasy team murderer at this point. Does he have a goal yet? Does
No.
he have one?
He's 0-7.
Ugh.
He's 0-7. That'll be one of the records of one of the Mets starters in May.
Oh, poor Mets. That's another guy, though, that you got to think San Jose might be shopping Ryan Clough right now because of his lethargic start, shall we say. You got to think that they might be trying to kick the tires to see what's out there. Might be one of those things where a change of scenery for Ryan Clough. Yeah, you're not going to expect him to put up a whole lot of goals anymore, but he's a gritty, hard-nosed player that can kill some penalties as well. So you're going to have to think if San Jose is looking to maybe even just make a hockey trade and move a Ryan Clough for another team's kind of whipping boy that may need a change in scenery as well.
Yeah, Ryan Clough, I think needs a change of scenery. I'm trying to think who might be some good trading partners for him. It's tough to say. I wouldn't mind the Rangers getting him. Hopefully.
Yeah, well, as long as he stays with 0 goals, you can have him.
Yeah, but we'll see. I don't think he'll end up with 0 for long. You know what? He's going to get his first goal within the week, provided he's back in the lineup. I think he's hurt again.
Is he hurt again?
I think he's hurt again. He was suspended recently, and I think he just got hurt. So he's going to get his first goal by the end of March. So it's 10 days left.
You shortchanged Ryan Clough, sir. He has 9 assists. Thank you very much.
Oh, 9 assists. All right. So he's 0-9. That's a starter for the Astros in June.
Yeah. Looks like, he is injured, though, unfortunately, day to day as of 3 days ago with the shoulder injury. So I guess my bold prediction that he was scoring against Edmonton tonight probably not going to come to fruition. But you got to think, unfortunately, with him being banged up and having a bad season, that you're probably going to see him finish this season on a different team. But never know. Good player. Kind of gritty, kind of dirty, kind of nasty. So there would definitely be a team out there looking for that kind of hard-nosed player on a third line or maybe even a fourth line role, depending on how good the rest of your team is.
Yeah, but he's kind of buried on that squad right now. So maybe if he has that change of scenery, hopefully he'll pick things up. If things haven't quite gone the way for him this year, as I'm sure with other players, the lockout has affected some players in a negative way, and he's one of them.
Yeah, and it's a shame to see because a lot of these players are benefiting from it. I mean, you look at guys like Chris Kunitz and Pascal Dupuis, undrafted free agents that are now playing with the best in the world. The CM Punk of hockey, Sidney Crosby, who is just making them look like absolutely stellar all-stars, both having almost career years here in this shortened season, on pace for just ridiculous numbers if this season would have went to 82. But unfortunately, you see a lot of players that are going the other way and having career worst seasons because they just can't get it going, or the slow start, or not coming to camp in shape, thinking that the lockout was going to go all year. It's tough to see that happen to good players like that, but hopefully we'll have kind of another wacky season like 2005, 2006, where you end up with Carolina and Edmonton vying for the Stanley Cup. Edmonton being the 8th seed and coming out of the West, and it's kind of a wacky year as well. So maybe we'll see another kind of strange season like that, and things will get a little bit more back to normal with the full season starting next year.
Oh, yeah, I've got my popcorn ready for the Winnipeg Jets Columbus Blue Jackets Stanley Cup Final.
2017, it's coming. It's coming.
That'll be a great finals.
Hey, the crowd alone in Winnipeg would make for a great. There's 34 points. Might find themselves at the. I wouldn't mind seeing them sneak in this year. And well, not sneaking in right now. They're leading the division, but
Not by
Carolina
much.
only 2 points behind with a game in hand. So Carolina looking pretty sharp this year. So you got to imagine that probably both of them are going to get in with the struggles that other teams have been facing. But of course, no guarantees with 3-point games and shortened season. Teams that are sitting in the top of their division right now, especially only with 34 points, might find themselves at the 9 or 10 seed looking in.
Yeah, you know what? Who knows? What if the Florida Panthers go on a big run? They're only 10 points out. They're sure in the basement of the Eastern Conference, but that's the beauty of this lockout shortened season. You know what? Even though I am a Rangers fan, I will still recognize the 94-95 lockout win by the Devils. The shortened season has made things a little bit more interesting. It's going to get fans into it all the way to the end of the year and give some teams some hope. And it's going to make for some interesting playoff matchups this year. So I say bring on the shortened season. It's been great so far.
Yeah, and it starts to make you question, and perhaps we should save this for another show. I don't want to get into a 2-hour podcast here, but whether the number of games in a season, I know that the owners and the sponsors and everybody like that and the buildings would never go for less than 82 games in a season, but the hockey has been really good, really fast-paced. Every game actually matters. Every game in your conference, so basically a 4-point game every night. It's made my center ice experience much more enjoyable. I've had a blast flipping between all the different games going on and having games every night. There's never a night on the schedule where you don't have at least one game. So I'm actually kind of a proponent of a shorter season, maybe somewhere between like 55 and 60 games. To kind of make them all mean a little bit more, and to have guys healthier and more rested going into the grueling marathon that is the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we're never going to see that because of all the sponsorship stuff and lost revenue during games. But when you look at that, could mean obviously different sports, but people are vested in the NFL because every game matters. I mean, you have one stumble, that could mean it could ruin the rest of your season in the National Football League. So you get into every game, and things are close towards the end of the year. I mean, I'm a Colts fan, and it was amazing to see after that slow start that they had what they were able to do to get into the playoffs. And, you know, some teams have had slow starts this year, but they managed to pick themselves back up. Columbus being an example. They had a slow start this year, and they've played very well as of late. Winnipeg didn't have the best of starts. Now they're in the top of the Southeast Division. Granted, a very weak division, but you didn't think that they'd be at the top even this late into the season. It's hard to say. It's hard to believe that we're saying this late into the season. We're almost 3/4 of the way there already, which is quite it's unbelievable to fathom. But I'm a big fan of seeing a shorter season. I think the season is too long as it is. Unfortunately, we're not going to see a shortened season anywhere in the future. But, I mean, part of the reason, I mean, granted, I'm a big baseball fan also, but I can't sit down and watch every single game. It's too long of a grind. And, you know, games in April and May, I mean, granted, they do mean something, but it's almost as if there's just too much baseball going on. And it doesn't seem like it means much as it would in August or September, but in this shortened season, every game has been meaningful. Whether it's in January or in April, every game's been meaningful in the NHL season so far. It's been a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, there's been no dog days of January and February in the NHL season. The lull after the first couple months, you're kind of waiting, just limping along towards the All-Star game or the Olympics, trying to find something to drum up some interest. But yeah, no dog days of February for this NHL season, and certainly no dog days of March for the Penguins, who as of right now have not lost a game in March. Have not lost a game since signing Mark Eden and bringing him back. So we didn't mention Mark Eden. Good to have him back as well. And to your point on baseball, every team loses 50 games. Every team wins 50 games. Baseball season should be 62 games. There, I said it.
Hey, Mark Eaton's the pride of Delaware, so anytime you mention the pride of Wilmington, Delaware, Mark Eaton, I think we have to mention it.
Yeah, I mean, I think he might be the only ever NHLer to come out of Delaware.
The only NHLer from the first state. I think they're the first state, Delaware.
That's true. They ratified first. So. Good on you, Mark Eden. Glad to have you back in the Vegas gold and black. And nice to see the Penguins winning all the games that you've been in. So don't want to go on too long tonight, Paul. Is there anything you want to get to before we wrap up?
Well, OHL playoffs are starting this weekend, and my pick are the Plymouth Whalers. They're gonna go to Saskatchewan. I think they're gonna win the OHL over Barrie.
Wow. Even with Scheifele's back.
Even with Scheifele back. Barrie's they're going to go to the finals. I think it'll go out of the Eastern Conference, but the Plymouth Whalers have been a team possessed in the second half, and they're going to be very tough to beat, even with that London Knights team in the Western Conference. But the London Knights are a much different team in the second half compared to the first half, much like the Plymouth Whalers. I think the Whalers are the stronger team right now, and they're the team that can stop the London Knights as they progress towards the OHL finals and eventually the Memorial Cup.
All right. Well, if you're going Plymouth, I got to go with Scheifele's. I'm going with Scheifele and the Barrie Colts, just so we have something to bet on here. We'll get stakes going later.
All right, there we go. I think a steak for a steak. I think if Plymouth wins, you owe me a steak.
Steak dinner. All right, I can do a steak dinner. I was going to go case of beer, but steak dinner will work.
Ooh, well, that's tough. You know, we'll play it by ear.
We'll negotiate. We'll see. Next podcast, we'll have the full stakes determined for our OHL bet here. So, if anybody listening wants to get in on it as well and pick one of the other teams, both. Who knows? Could be amazing. Cool. You pick your team and potentially win a case of beer or a steak or both. Who knows? Could be amazing.
I want to see if somebody goes for the Mississauga Steelheads. That's for the name. The Rainbow Trout of Mississauga.
The Rainbow Trout.
They'll probably get swept in the first round.
Rainbow Trout are what it's all about. I think that's their team slogan. If not, it is now.
Hey, you know, they should hire you as their marketing guy.
Hey, I can do it. You need somebody to make up stupid slogans about your team, you call me. I can work bad puns, whatever you need. We can make this happen.
There we go. We'll have to have that as a future segment. The rejected marketing slogans from Jim Merritt.
All right, I'll start working on some for the next podcast.
There we go. All right. Well, it's been fun again this week, and I think we're gonna have a very short turnaround on our next episode. So, here for that in the near future. Again, this is Paul Roper and.
This is Jim Merritt, and hopefully maybe I'll be up in Erie this weekend. Maybe we'll even get together and not have to do the long-distance Skype cast. Maybe we'll be able to do another in-person job. And so listen to this one quickly, folks, because the next one might be coming pretty soon. And from both of us here at the Ziggy and Zarley podcast, we appreciate you sticking around this long and listening. And don't worry, we won't have to play the Welcome Back song next time because it'll be like we never left.
That's right. Take care, everybody.